Welcome back. I trust that you've had the opportunity to listen to the two stories regarding aggression against objects. I'm so sorry to have put you through that. That you've had the opportunity to take the aggression quiz and have performed admirably. And at this moment, you have in your grimy little hands the Word document, the multi page document that we're going to be using as we discuss ways to prevent it from ever surfacing, ways to diffuse it if it does rear its ugly head, and how to respond after the fact so that we can reduce the chances of this aggression surfacing again in the future. When violence erupts in the schools, educators typically respond in one of two ways, one more so than the other. Typically, we do what was done when Kilauea and Mauna Loa erupted on the Big Island of Hawaii. Between 1935 and 1976, the Army Air Force conducted 5 bombings of lava flows there. One attempt was successful at diverting the flow. The others were not. This outcome seems to me to be very much in alignment with our success rate, or lack of it, in the schools. While getting tough with them in order to protect our student population seems well directed, noble, and indicated, it doesn't work well, and sometimes it makes things worse. Typically, zero tolerance equals zero thinking, and that's a sad scenario when educators fail to use their minds and educate themselves. So, how do educators promote the aggression that they complain about? What factors have been identified and researched by investigators such as Walker and Rudder as correlating with violence in the schools? Here are the usual suspects. First of all, a low emphasis on academic work, although this can also be a result of aggression, not just a precursor to it. Another factor is low rates of praise, and we should say effective praise. Certainly, praising kids is the best strategy that we have for promoting the behavior we want to see. Unfortunately, there are a lot of educators out there who are of the mindset that, hey, I ain't their parent, that's their job. Or, hey, I've only got so many nice things to say in me, and I ain't wasting them on somebody else's kid. There are other teachers out there who are praising profusely and not getting the results they wanted. Yes, there's a difference between praise and effective praise. And these individuals on either extreme would want to seek out the materials on behavioradvisor.com regarding the effective use of praise. Some other factors. Little emphasis placed on individual responsibility. These educators would be advised to go to the Circle of Courage podcast found on Behavior Advisor. Other factors, a high student-teacher ratio, where we lose that sense of community within the school. High-risk children being clustered with a high density of other high-risk students. Youngsters placed in these settings are at great risk for modeling the behavior of the other kids, or presenting a tough image to others in order to protect themselves, making others aware that they are not to be trifled with. I think perhaps the 3 biggest factors are rejecting and non-supportive responses from teachers, poor student-teacher relationships, and poor classroom management skills on the part of our classroom educators. When we've got these 3 factors, we're at great risk for another one that's been identified, a spiraling pattern of child misbehavior and teacher reactivity. We find an escalating battle of negative reinforcement, each party trying to get the other party to back down. Teachers using more of what already isn't working, breaking that student-teacher bond that is so important to convincing kids to change their ways, getting enmeshed in the conflict cycle as described by Nick Long and found on Behavior Advisor. How is it that we find educators creating the very behavior that they complain about? Why are they experiencing these problems? Well, most educators haven't been trained in certain important areas. In what areas could you have used more training in working with youngsters who engage in inappropriate behavior and aggressive acts? Perhaps positive behavior management, positive and effective and instructional behavior management, creating a sense of community within the classroom and the school building, connecting interpersonally with kids who engage in inappropriate and or coercive actions, perhaps some instruction in de-escalating emerging crises, how to resolve conflict, how to engage in problem-solving procedures, or avoiding the contagion of behavior, which is the adoption of the student's demeanor. That the youngster engages us negatively, we respond negatively, and again, we get that escalating conflict cycle. After incidents like that have transpired, and I hear the teacher say, I don't put up with any crap from these kids. I let them know who's boss. I let them know who's got the juice. I know that they know nothing about the conflict cycle and how they've gotten engaged in it. Nothing about active listening, problem solving, classroom counseling, or the teaching of anger management and alternative behaviors when one is emotionally involved. Oh, there were so many incidents between one of my students, Pete, and one of his teachers in the mainstream when he left my self-contained classroom. Pete would voice some concern, ask for some assistance, and that teacher would just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, failing to really listen to hear what Pete had to say, what his concerns were. And that would enrage Pete and then enrage the gen ed teacher. This scenario played itself out so many times of Pete inquiring, the teacher repeating the same line over and over again, that eventually these incidents came to be known as situations between Pete and repeat. In both principle and effect, I'm hoping that educators will come to emulate the citizens of Eldfell, Iceland, back in 1973 when they experienced a volcanic eruption above their town. The lava flows came down into the harbor of this fishing village and started to solidify. It was threatening to seal off the entrance to their harbor. These creative and resourceful citizens pumped the icy water up onto the lava flows, solidifying it before it reached the harbor, blocking the flow. And that's our focus in this podcast. Cooling hot situations. What do we do when we sense a problem? Others are fighting, or you hear the word fight yelled by some students. What do you do when you're the target of the aggression? The person is poised to strike, or you are under attack. What do we do once the incident is over? At this time, place your intervention packet in front of you. To make the session more interesting and realistic, I'll be picking a fight with you. I'm just kidding. But if I raised your pulse just a little bit, as you sensed imminent violence, then good. Let's talk. Let's talk prevention. The first priority is always to prevent a crisis. Now, have any of you ever lost your temper? Oh, so it's not just the kids who lose their temper. Anybody about ready to strike out right at this moment? Probably not. But how do you know that you're not? Ah, you know your signals. You're aware of your emotional and physical indicators. Now, how many of you have dogs? A lot of you. Do you know when it's hungry? Do you know when it wants to go out? Yeah. Guess what? Kids have signals too. And we should come to know the signals that are given off by each particular kid and help them to recognize their own. Then the strategies that we've taught them to handle this welling up of emotions can be put into play. Now, what signals do some of your kids give? I remember Jacinto. There was one signal that always tipped us off that he was going to have trouble. He'd show up to school. But for other kids, like Rodney, I would find his arm muscles tensing. Watching the Three Stooges, you know Curly's going to have a problem when he starts wiping his face with his hands and twirling around. But we can take it back even further. We can prevent even before that stage. We can take each student's emotional temperature as he or she enters the room or gets off the bus, or we can do this with just our susceptible kids. We take notice of any unusual behavior or the signals that we've talked about previously. We say, "Good morning," and we monitor their response. We offer to shake hands. And is it beyond a firm handshake? Is this youngster tense instead of being noodle-like? But yes, we bring out our emotional thermometer to find out if this youngster is carrying in a problem from home, the last class, lunch, recess. We ask, "How you feeling? Everything okay?" If not, we get others on task first so we can talk quickly with this youngster. One of the indicated educational practices is when the youngster enters into your room, there should be a do now activity on the board. The moment they enter into your room, they are engaged in an activity, coming up with perhaps something that will help them in the lesson that you're about to present. As an example, on the board you ask the youngsters to come up with 5 words that rhyme with the color orange. You could do that, right? Well, if you're having problems, choose either silver or purple. But that will keep the kids busy for a while. If we can't talk just then, tell the youngster we'll talk when we have the opportunity, or talk with him or her in a half hour. Just showing concern for the youngster may be enough, especially if the youngster doesn't want to talk about these sort of things. What upfront strategies do you use to take kids' emotional temperature? One teacher required a toll to the smile troll as she entered, and if you didn't smile, she'd pull one out of her pocket and give it to you. She knew what I once found on a fortune cookie. A smile is your personal welcome mat. Very different from the welcome mat that some teachers present that kids see an opportunity to walk on them. She knew when you feel good, you smile. Conversely, they found a physical reaction in the brain. When you smile, chemicals are produced in the mind that make you feel good. So let's engage in an activity right now. Most of you are probably not smiling, despite the fact that we're spending time in this moment together. But I would say, try it. You'll like it. Sort of like the green ham and eggs book that my 4-year-old loves so much. Try it. You'll like it. Give me a smile right now. Really, a big one. Thanks, I needed that. For those of you not smiling, I am the holder of the world's funniest joke. I could tell you, but you'd die laughing. For those of you who did smile, did it change you mentally? Were you feeling more optimistic? Alive? You willing to lend me some money? You might decide to do a periodic checkup of your class's emotional status. With younger kids, they can have a feelings chart attached to their desk. And every once in a while, you can ask them to check off one of 5 faces in a row. From the enormous smile, the pleasant smile, to the horizontal lips, to the slightly displeased lips to the very sad lips, and asking kids to check off which box applies at that moment. You can walk around, get an assessment of where each kid is at, emotionally speaking. For our older kids, once in a while you could ask them to give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I sometimes do this with my audiences and I see thumbs in the mouth. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But periodically I have to admit that I was told by my BD kids to take that thumb and stick it where the sun don't shine. I interpreted that to be a thumbs down response. Prevention. Our focus when working with kids who sometimes exhibit aggression. We'll move now into the what do we do in the moment strategies. Please join me by accessing the next segment of this podcast.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.